welcome back to another edition of the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. I am Ray Russell, and this week, Bob continues to answer your questions and talk random topics. We got some fun questions coming Bob's way, some hypotheticals and some other listener questions discussing various people and things from time gone by. And in order to do all of that, we got to bring the man back onto the show himself, the one and only. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Bob Roop.
Well, it's nice to be back. Thank you for being out there. If you're hearing this, that's the reason I'm here. Because without you, without those years out there, especially yours, Ray and I wouldn't need to be here. So, again, thank you, and I hope you're well. And I'll start out. I hope you're well. Being happy sometimes is difficult, but I hope you're at least content and at peace. If you can have that, you really are doing well. So let's get down to. I know folks don't want to hear me talking about good wishes and stuff. They want to hear some wrestling. So
let's see some of that real wrestling, Bob. Let's do some of that real talking. Screw real life. Let's talk about wrestling. Yeah, absolutely. So, let's get down to the brass tacks, guys. We do have more questions. You talk about the listeners out there. They must be listening because they continue to send in the questions. And I got a couple here from Kevin Mogford. Kevon Mogford, perhaps, is how you pronounce his name. I do pronounce if I butchered it. He sent in 2 questions, and we're going to get to both of them because he was polite enough to say, and bear with me, guys, I left my my reading glasses in the car, and my wife's off to work in said car, so I'm trying to squint and read this as we go along. It says, I just want to say, I love the podcast you do with Bob Roop. It's the only wrestling podcast where I've listened to every episode. If you are still going to do the Ask Bob Anything, I was wondering if you could ask him a couple of questions. Well, that's what we're going to do right now, Bob. We're going to get into those questions, and I'm going to flip-flop. I'm going to do the second one first because I think it's a fun question. The other one's a little more serious. This is a hypothetical, and he says, gun to your head, Bob. Not literally, figuratively. He said, gun to your head. If you had to pick a winner, who would win in a shoot fight, a real legit fight between Olympian and pro wrestler Chris Taylor versus Andre the Giant? Wow.
That's a great question.
Trying to picture that one in your head? My goodness.
As I'll tell you what, it depends. If Chris can get Andre down without getting mangled somehow or something broken, he would easily win. I'll give you an example of exactly what I'm talking about. The Muhammad Ali Inoki fight,
right,
so to speak, was supposed to be like mixed martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
At the last second, I believe, like just right before the match, they changed the rules and said, hey, no wrestling, because they knew if Inoki had been able to wrestle, the fight would have been over in about 15 seconds because he would have taken Ali down and sugar-holded him or something, put him in a sleep or whatever.
I think Ali's people were afraid of that. There had also, in regards to that, my understanding was it was kind of a work shoot. They were going to go out there and work, but maybe the finish was going to be thrown. They kind of talked about maybe bringing it back for a rematch. Ali, some kind of screw job deal where Inoki goes over so Ali can come back and get his win. But, they get to the day of the fight, and Ali's like, I don't really trust any of this. And I think that's why they kind of changed the rules and everything changed. And that's why Inoki said, well, I don't really trust Ali then. I'm not going to stand up there with him. And of course, he sits on his, lays on his back for the entire match.
Well, he kept kicking him. And, this again all might be hyperbole. I mean, we don't know. I didn't see Ali's leg, but I saw pictures of it. Inoki, those kicks.
Yeah.
The mixed martial arts is like everywhere now. Those kicks are vicious. They hurt. I mean, there's guys that have been lost fights from having not 10, but having 3 or 4 good kicks to the leg has crippled them to the point where they're easy to take down and beat. If Andre managed to overpower Chris and smash him and now Chris had a lot of bulk and ways to protect himself, but if Andre it was always the same. If it's going to be between a boxer and a wrestler, is who does the wrestler get the guy down first? He's going to win. If Ali catches Inoki with a right cross coming in, the fight's over, and he wins easily. I mean, Inoki looks like a chump. I would have to say, I hate it because I love Andre and I respect the heck out of Chris. I think Chris might have won because I think that, I mean, he had the same size. Andre he wasn't outweighed by much. And Andre had 500 pounds. Oh, here's another factor, conditioning. Now, if you're talking about Andre when he was still before Andre.
I think we were talking about in their primes. I think he mentioned that back in the 70s is where he referenced. Obviously, Chris Taylor passed away in the late 70s, so this would have been.
Right. And I hate to be so wishy-washy about this. It would depend on who struck first. If Chris got him down, the fight's over. Unless Andre knew hooks, if he knew wrist locks and, ways to. Now, he was a powerful man, and, his thumb is in the eye, it's going to take maybe both eyes with one thumb because he's so big. But I tell you, that's call me Mr. Wishy-Washy here. It depends on who strikes first. If Andre manages to stun Chris Taylor, then of course he's going to eat. If Chris even goes down, Andre can put the boots to him and kick him in the head a couple of times with that size 18-foot or whatever it was. It might have been width, and it's over. If Chris got him down on his face with his weight on him, he would beat Andre just by laying on him. I don't know if Andre would be able to get away. Chris weighed almost 500 pounds himself.
Right.
He was up in the 440s, I think. You know what's interesting? Both those guys had very genteel personalities. Neither one of them pushed their weight around. That's not a play on words. Both of them were like gentlemen. They never acted like the superstar. I mean, Andre was a superstar, like to the media. Chris never even got close to that because he wasn't even really suited to be a pro wrestler, especially as a babyface, because of his looks.
Right.
He was a sweet guy, but he wasn't physically attractive. He looked like a big, pardon the expression, but having spent much of my life in exactly that shape, he looked like a big fat slob. You see him sitting on a bench, you think, wow, look at that big fatty. I could kick his butt in a second. Make the mistake of going up and slapping him or something, find yourself in about 3 pieces in a matter of 30 seconds. But it would depend, and again, this is a wishy-washy answer. It depends on who strikes first. If Chris can get a hold and get Andre down, I think he'd wear him out and beat him. Now again, that's a tall order. That's a big if. If Andre just backed into a corner, I don't see him wanting to fight like this and be on the defensive. But if it's say an empty stadium and this is life and death, if he backed into a corner and made Chris attack him where his back was protected, Chris couldn't get behind him to take him down, then he'd win easily. Because he had much longer arms and legs than Chris. He could kick him to death. Every time Chris tried to come in, like to grab his leg or whatever, he could kick him on the way in, club him on, even if Chris got a hold of him, he could club him with that humongous hand of his and arm. He could club him and pound on him. To the point where if Chris did get him down, he would be in a terribly weakened position, maybe even semi-conscious. So it would depend. It's always been that way between a wrestler and a martial artist. I talked about my time practicing martial arts because Ruslan Eric said he was going to have me take on the toughest guy on every NFL team all on the same night. I thought I better learn a little bit more than just wrestling. But with the martial arts, once I found out that there were no rules, I immediately quit, because if there's no rules, I'm still, hey, I don't care how good a martial artist you are. I think I can beat you, because I'm going to wait till I find a position where maybe it's a kick or whatever, but where I can get a hold of you. And once I do, you're through. I mean, again, I was at Olympic level here we're talking about. I was still in great shape. And that's another thing, too, the conditioning. Now, Andre, when he was young and doing drop kicks and all that, probably weighed, I don't know, 350 or whatever, which was slim, fairly slim for him. That would have been a very interesting fight. But again, and I'm sorry again to be so wishy-washy, it would depend on who struck first, who got in a major blow first. If Chris could get Andre down and put his weight on him, knew how to defend himself against, keep his eyes from being gouged, or keep his arms and hands away from Andre's teeth, where he can't be bitten or whatever.
It's a lot of teeth.
I mean,
I'm totally, yeah. I'm totally,
get bitten by a lion.
I think a lot of people don't realize that Andre's background, he had background in sports. He had played in rugby. He knew the sense of balance and leverage. And could you imagine being the other team? I would just forfeit the game if I saw that guy across from me in a game of rugby. But no, so Andre understood, like I said, balance and leverage and things of that nature. So I think it would have been a little more interesting than just a guy who walked in off the street wanting to be a pro wrestler versus Olympic level amateur wrestler like Chris Taylor was. So yeah, I can see where you would say it really depends on who gets any fight really comes down to that. Well, maybe not any fight, but a lot of fights come down to that. And it would have been interesting if Taylor had come in and tried to just take Andre down. Andre having that background in amateur sports of his own, maybe he was able to hold his ground long enough to get a thumb all the way through an eye or something. Yeah, that'd be a fight. That'd be man, they could have made a lot of money off that in today's world.
Oh, yeah. With what you just said, I never saw it, but I heard stories about Andre's, like he and I both wrestled in Baghdad, and, he got shot at over there. He it went through his hair, and missed his head. The guy shot at his head. It missed his head. It went through his hair. I asked Andre about it years later. He said, "Lousy shot. Who could miss me?" That's kind of a casual attitude. But a young Andre, I might be leaning towards him because if he's got the conditioning, and again, if he's smart enough to know. I mean, we didn't know how much. I don't know how much. Maybe Andre knew judo or some kind of martial arts or kickboxing or something. We don't know. I know that when he was young, he was doing drop kicks and all that. And when McMahon Sr. Got hold of him and changed his name to Andre, he said, "Hey, quit doing all that stuff. You're no longer doing drop kicks or any of that stuff. You're now the immovable object. So you just stand there and be immovable." Andre, all of a sudden, he's probably started making 3 times the money he'd been making. So what's he going to say? No?
Yeah, I guess sometimes less is more. It certainly probably prolonged his career and his health anyway. I mean, and not that Andre was in great shape the last several years he was in the ring, but you imagine if he had just continued to try to work the style he had worked before Vince Sr. got a hold of him, how much shorter Andre's career might have been.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, true. He might have gotten seriously hurt by Chris Taylor or by his own actions. I think that as he, maybe one of the reasons that he gained so much weight was from not being able to do much in the ring. His role was very simple. Just kind of go out. He didn't have to burn a lot of calories. Let's put it that way. Whereas before, when he was trying to be an entertainer like everybody else and to show his moves, like, again, with doing drop kicks and, guys 7 feet something, over 300 pounds doing drop kicks, it's pretty rare. Again, I think in their prime, I'm leaning on Andre because, again, of having, he's a foot taller than Chris, so he can hammer, even if Chris is down trying to grab a leg, he can be hammering at him with both hands.
Yeah, those are some big hands too. So.
Yeah, and so, just getting to him would be very difficult. I don't know if Chris knew how to single leg. There's a way that you can you attack a guy on one ankle, and as you're doing it, you're moving around behind him to where as you're pulling his leg with you, and usually you stand up, and the guy standing on one leg, you have the other one under one arm down by the ankle, and you trip that other leg, and he goes down. Very common wrestling takedown. Doing that with Andre, I don't know. Again,
maybe wait till he's got about a case of wine in him, and go after him then. That's probably the best.
That's just the before dinner drinks. What are you talking about? Yeah. He. I don't know if he bought by the case, but I know that he was spending. When I heard he was spending $3,000 or $4,000 for dinner or lunch, I knew it had to be the wine. I can't think of any food that expensive. It had to be $500 bottles of wine he was ordering like Cokes. So, he could afford it. He lived every day like it was going to be his last. He was literally larger than life. He was, but you know what? What a friend to have. If he liked you, it was an honor in a way because, he was an exceptional, not just as a wrestler, but as a person.
Yeah.
He was very intelligent, and he was kind. He was good-hearted. To think of the things that he had to put up with.
Yeah.
Everywhere he went, he'd attract a crowd. He'd have 50 people standing around him, just looking at him. All he's doing is waiting for a bus or something. Yeah, he put up with that, and this is pro wrestling we're talking about. One of his defensive moves was to pass gas, and apparently he could pass gas better than most gas companies could, because a wrestling teammate of mine, George McCreary, went to Japan, had the good fortune to be in Japan with Andre, and told two stories about Andre ripping one out. One was in a restaurant, and there was a bunch of people waiting in line behind him, and they were all crowding around to where, instead of a line, they were like a mob around him. He's trying to pay his bill. So he apparently, he would warn you. He'd lift one leg. That usually tells you what's coming next. And he'd rip one off. And George McCurry, he almost fell down on the floor laughing. And I did too. He said, half the customers in the store, in the restaurant, ran out. The other one was, even funnier, was that he was waiting for the bus for the wrestlers to come pick him up. And while he was waiting, within, just after the matches, while he was waiting by himself, apparently he attracted a crowd of hundreds. And they were right next to a very busy street. And, being surrounded. And not by people making demands of them, just standing there staring at him, just like, it make you feel like kind of like a freak. And he was a freak of nature, but I mean that in the kindest possible way. That doesn't make him bad. Arnold Schwarzenegger was a freak of nature, but he made it himself that way, So, it's a good thing. I'm not saying Andre was a freak in the sense of being someone who's trying to be outlandish and nasty or whatever, but he was a freak of nature being that big. Well, he had giantism, Well, anyway, a big crowd around at the highway, a busy highway, like 4 lanes, cars rushing both ways. He cut one out there, and George said that he was there to witness it. He said, my buddy George says about half the people in the crowd just immediately turned and ran in the other direction. He said half of them ran out into the highway in front of cars going about 50 miles an hour. It was a miracle. A bunch of them weren't killed, but he said you could hear brakes squealing for like a mile away. Nobody was killed or injured, so that's why it's a funny story.
Yeah.
But yeah, Andre had a very, very interesting way of discouraging company. Yeah.
Gotta love the Andre stories. There's so many of them out there. Just wish, had Andre been placed in a different era, like a more recent era, there would just be so much more footage of the things he was doing out there in this world. It would have just been phenomenal to get a little more Andre outside of the wrestling business. But thank God the stories are still out there from Andre's time and everything. And from, the stories you just told all the way to, unfortunately near the end of his time, he was down there in Mexico wrestling, and there was, we talked about Bad News Allen briefly before, a former judo bronze champion in the Olympics, and Bad News Brown in the WWF. And Andre was doing that thing where he would grab the ropes and kind of use them to kind of keep balance while he would drop his butt on you repeatedly. And Andre had taken in the local taco scene or something like, I don't know, something went wrong inside the Giant's body though, and I guess out comes some diarrhea on poor Bad News.
Oh, my God.
As Andre's doing this, and Bad News had to roll out of the ring and leave. Like, he obviously left ringside. He's like, I'm done. That's enough of that. So,
yeah. I'm sorry, I can't resist. All right, Andre, I've had enough crap from you for tonight.
Yeah. I don't know what the finish originally was, but I don't think that was the book finish anyway.
Hey, you talk about a shitty finish. I'm sorry, I couldn't.
Yeah, I love it.
Couldn't resist.
Little rim shot there. There we go.
Yeah, well, he was a great guy to have. It was hard to be friends with him, but as an acquaintance, because you didn't see him, you couldn't be around him much. He was always traveling. I think Frenchie
Bernard
and Frenchie and his girl, his wife. I think Andre left something, maybe his ranch. I think they had a place on his ranch that he left to them in his will, that they would have, and it was paid for, of course, that they would have, and they could live there, because Frenchie stayed with him for years and took care of the place while he was gone. And I got a chance to meet Frenchie briefly, and he was a very likable guy. But he took care of the ranch when Andre was gone, and then when he was there, he and his wife made, they probably made meals for him, and did errands, did any running, picking up stuff or anything that needed to be done.
Right.
So Andre could just rest when he was home, because those knees, it doesn't matter how strong your upper body is. Those knees will only take so much, and then they start acting up. Once the tendons get loose or injured, and the cartilage gets damaged, the parts between the bones get damaged, especially with that kind of weight on them. It's very hard to come back from. And Andre to get a knee replacement, I don't know if they probably weren't doing them yet. Maybe not. I don't remember. Anyway, he paid the price for. We all do, but he paid the price for being a giant. His body eventually gave up. Gave out. Mm-hmm. But he lived life to the fullest. He lived every day like it's going to be his last. He did not, and I don't remember him ever mention of any drug other than alcohol. I don't remember any stories about him ever using cocaine or even smoke.
I can't imagine how much of some of those substances it would take. I mean, you couldn't even really do the math to know what's the proper dosage. Not that you should be doing that stuff out there, people. But
no,
it's
there is no proper dosage. Yeah, there's no proper dose.
I've had a couple people throughout time and having conversations with Andre, and you talked about Frenchie there being basically his caretaker of his ranch because Andre was always on the go. Even when working for Vince, he was always traveling. And a lot of people have asked me, why didn't Andre, he was such good friends with Frenchie. They both spoke French. Frenchie, I believe, was from Quebec, and of course Andre from Grenoble in the French Alps, as they said there in the WWF. But people would ask me, why didn't Andre get Frenchie a job at the WWF? Frenchie had worked a little in the early 70s. He had done a little heel managing. He was a referee. He could probably get a job there with Vince because of Andre. I said, Andre probably could have got. I mean, Tim White was a good friend. He was kind of, he became a referee there in the WWF, and Tim White was a guy who was basically Andre's handler, for lack of a better term, kind of making sure Andre's comfortable, getting him from place to place, things of that nature throughout time. And Tim White just kind of evolved into a full-time referee for the WWF as time went on, and he worked there for many, many years. He's passed away since, but Frenchie didn't need a job with Vince because Frenchie already had a job as Andre. I can't imagine what he was making sitting there out there on the ranch at Andre's farm, just making sure upkeep and everything.
My understanding, there was several hundred acres. I'm not sure, but it was sizable. Andre wanted a lot of room around him. He didn't want to have neighbors right next door. So he bought a place, where he had solitude. There weren't people around. Well, those kind of places need care. I mean, grass grows, weeds grow, hay grow. If you got 800 acres to take care of, Frenchie, I'm sure Frenchie, of course, had a tractor and with a mower and and all that, but it took daily work. You and I both know these homes are always taking. They give us shelter, but they're also taking repainting and fixing pipes and, on a daily basis, something's coming up and that's fine because we're using them, we're living in them. You can't expect them to stay, unharmed or pristine. People drop things or furniture ages or you invite King Kong Bundy to sit in your mother's kitchen chair.
Well, there goes that chair.
Yeah. Well, I didn't have any. We didn't have any in the house for that weight. It supported me fine. I weighed 300, but at times, and I sat there without any problem. But the big guy apparently overweight it. So yeah, Frenchie, I'm sure was busy.
I think it was something like 50 acres. That's a lot of land. I mean, for a guy who doesn't even ever come home, barely,
Right.
So.
And the other thing was to have someone there when Andre came home. So he didn't come home. Think about this.
Yeah.
He didn't come home to an empty house. He came home to people that, at least Frenchie, and I'm sure Frenchie's girlfriend or wife learned French. I'm sure she did, if she didn't already know it. So he had people he could talk to in his native language.
Yeah.
And he could relax. He didn't have people staring at him. And, he didn't have to worry about, he had privacy.
Yeah, that was his safe haven. They used to say that was the only place where Andre was truly just, very comfortable and just could kick back and relax and not worry about anything. This is my home, boss.
Hey, privacy is, to me, one of the most valuable commodities in my life, to be able to have some privacy, because after having been public for so long, not just with the wrestling, but with, scouting, you're out, you're not just having dead meetings a couple of nights a week, but you're camping on weekends, and during the summer, you're running summer camps. So you're out among people all the time and have very little privacy. So, and then as a school teacher, same thing. You got a classroom full of kids every day, and other teachers and all that. So you're around people all day. You come home and you have lessons to prepare. And so privacy is very, in my life, is one of the most valuable things that I have. I mean, I've got my two boys that we own this home together, but we're so used to each other that we can go a day or two without saying much to each other, and the love is there. We know how we feel about one another. We don't have to be saying it although I do. I tell them every day I love them every time I leave or they leave, because if something happens to me or them, hopefully me, I want that to be the last thing they heard from me, was that I love them. So maybe weird, whatever, but I don't think it hurts people to be told that they're loved. I mean, I certainly don't mind have them tell me that. So, yeah, it's usually like, yeah, Dad, we love you, but we love you best when we see you going rather than coming. I'm just kidding.
How can I miss you if you never go away, Bob Roop? Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that was fun spending we spent about a half hour there on Andre, and it's been long overdue. We talked about Andre in the past, but I'm glad we were able to kind of move into the world of Andre here, talk a little bit about the man behind the scenes, and I'm glad I got to share the diarrhea story with you too. And poor Bad News. And Bad News is the one that's told the story. He's passed on since then as well, but I'm pretty sure that you wouldn't make a story like that up if it involved yourself. So. No, that's
well, I guess you could say, I can see that on, like, there was a show, like, Guess Who's the Electrician or whatever. There'd be 3 or 4 guys, and the panel would have to question them and guess who it was. It was the plumber or whatever.
Yeah.
What's my line? Maybe.
Right. Yeah. The old "What's my line?" There you go.
Yeah. I could see Bad News on there, like, and the thing was, what's one of these people did Andre the Giant take a dump on? I'm sorry, folks. That's pro wrestling sense of humor. Yeah. Down in the dumps, there I go again. I'm sorry. I can't help myself. Wordplay, I do crossword puzzles, and I guess wordplay is my form of self-entertainment anyway. My philosophy is, okay, maybe I'm the only one laughing, but at least somebody's amused.
It's to tell the truth with Bob Roop. That's we got to get you on the TV, like right after Drew Carey and The Price is Right or something. There, have to bump Wayne Brady or something. I don't know.
Relive the glory days of Memphis wrestling with the Retro Wrestling Review USWA podcast. Each week, we go back in time to review USWA Championship Wrestling from the 1990s, episode by episode. Join us for watch-alongs, behind-the-scenes stories, and exclusive interviews with people who were there and lived it. Whether you grew up watching it or you're discovering it for the first time, this podcast is your ringside seat to Memphis wrestling history. It's all a part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Listen now at USWApodcast.com.
Hey guys, Ray Russell back to talk to you about all the new and exciting audio and video podcasts we've been putting together over at patreon.com/WrestleCopia. As a self-funded brand, this entire ship is powered by our patrons. It's your support that keeps all of these wonderful shows going here at WrestleCopia. And with that said, I wanted to mention that we now have 3 major tiers with tons of Patreon-exclusive next-level content for our Patreon supporters. And it all starts with the $5 all-access tier, which gets you early access to many of the weekly podcasts, at least a dozen monthly digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure, the insanely detailed show notes for the Wrestling Memory Grenade Regional Wrestling, and the OG Monday Warfare podcast, plus random bonus video drops, archived old-school audio watch-alongs from the early years of the brand. And if that's not all, the brand new Patreon-exclusive podcast, Ranting Raw, featuring yours truly, Ray Russell, completely uncensored, unfiltered, with honest takes, taking patron questions and addressing various topics from throughout wrestling history. It is a whole lot of fun wrapped under the all-access tier for only $5, but things get even hotter with the VIP Superfan tier. For just a few dollars more, you get everything already mentioned in the all-access tier, plus as part of the VIP tier, a whole new slew of videocast series where it's not just your typical watch-alongs. Sure, we laugh, we have fun, but we're also breaking down the history, the context, and the why behind what you're seeing. And as part of the VIP tier, you have access to Dan Gennety's Pro Resu Academy videocast, the Coliseum videocast with co-host Gene Jackson, and the Monday Warfare videocast, Raw versus Nitro, breaking down the history of the Monday Night War. Plus, you also get the Memphis 1985 folder of goodies and all show notes for the Puro Academy podcast and Gene's Retro Review Show. Lots to be had there at the VIP tier. But wait, there's more. For those WrestleCopia backers who crave even more from the brand, we bring you yet another level of content fit for a warrior, because it is indeed the ultimate tier, which gives you everything from the All Access Pass, everything from the VIP tier, plus you will receive access to the big ones video series featuring a lengthy look and discussion into some of the biggest pay-per-views, super shows, and other events from throughout wrestling history. It's also a great place to keep up with the big events that coincide with the Monday Warfare videocast and so many other big events from years gone by. You'll also have access to the newest big hit to the Copia brand. I'm talking about Regional Wrestling Unreal, the video series. Get ready for the next level in regional wrestling as we dissect territory history in video form. Watch along with us. But still, even more for your money, guys. You'll also receive access to the Treasure Chest, which offers patrons the unique opportunity to download and watch select rarities from wrestling history. And for those of you who are wondering what we offer, are contemplating joining a paid Patreon membership, or simply a curious lurker, a reminder there's a free tier at our Patreon that you can join as well. Remember, guys, no subscription, cancel any time, but I think you'll like the content that we're offering there for any budget you may have. And you can sign up right now, patreon.com/WrestleCopia, or look for the QR code where available. We appreciate your support in helping us pay the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network running and enabling us to continue to bring you all of the quality programming that we offer.
This is Wrestling Nostalgia, the podcast that dives into wrestling history. Hey, wrestling fans, I'm Dave Dynasty, and if you enjoy podcasts that are knowledgeable and history-driven, then Wrestling Nostalgia is for you. With great guests and fun interviews, there are over 200 episodes in our archives. We chat with several first-time guests and often cover topics not discussed on other podcasts. Look up Wrestling Nostalgia on your favorite podcast platform and visit all of our links at linktree/WrestlePod. That is linktr.ee/RASSLEPOD. And remember, wherever you go, whatever you do, be good, be safe, and keep on growing.
We got to get rolling on, though. We've got another question here, Bob.
Okay.
Same guy, Mr. Mogford again. And the other question he asked was, did Bob Roop ever get into many street fights or bar fights during his career like a lot of wrestlers say they did because they were quote-unquote protecting the business? So there's been a billion stories out there from throughout time. Some are probably slightly true. Some are probably not real at all. But all of them go back to somebody was making fun of the business. Somebody was making fun of me and that fake wrestling that I did, and I had to go knock them out. So I guess the question is, did you, and we've talked about in the past, you running into unruly fans, even having a gun pointed at you because you had to go mess with Steve Kern's dad. But have you ever gotten into a physical altercation with a fan at any point in time in your career? You may have told a story and I'm just drawing a blank right now on it. But so I guess the question is, have you been in many bar fights to quote unquote protect the business?
No. Generally, I would avoid that kind of situation. The one bar fight I got into was with Dick Slater. It wasn't much of a fight. He never touched me. I hit him. I smacked him twice with a billy club. So, and as far as hitting him with my hand or even getting to kick him or something, I didn't get. I was being held by a couple of people, actually 3. One guy had me around the waist and had his head buried in my side. I couldn't get rid of him. So, no. Now, I told the Harley Race story about that big scar on the back of his hand, on the back of his left hand, that looked exactly like somebody took a pair of dentures and hammered it into his hand, like half an inch, and then pulled it out. And what was left, once it scarred, because it looked like a set of teeth. that was a shape. And when I asked Harley about it, he'd had a guy in a bar that was, flipping off, and blah, 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 and Harley just ignored him until the guy got close enough. The guy kept getting closer and closer, and Harley set him up when he was close enough by lifting his right hand, and the guy was looking at that, and he said he didn't realize Harley was left-handed. And Harley lifted his right hand, and while the guy was watching that and getting ready to react to that, he came up with his left hand and caught the guy right in the teeth. To the point where, again, it left a big scar on his hand. And, of course, the guy went down. Harley said, yeah, I kicked him in the head a couple of times. Said I went back to my beer. But, even that story, that's not a badge of honor to Harley. Like, to have that, that's like a badge of, not shame. Harley was a tough guy and a lot, but he didn't need any scars to prove it. Well, you could tell by looking at him. If you looked at him and you maybe you didn't see it. He wasn't this great big muscular guy. But if he looked at you and cocked his head in a certain way and he looked at you and you looked in those eyes, I wouldn't go anywhere near him. I think I'll go mess with Andre over here. At least maybe I can outrun him. I don't want to mess with this guy here. He looks like he's waiting to murder somebody. I don't want it to be me. Yeah, Harley could be the nicest guy in the world, but he grew up tough. He grew up really rough, and he was a product of that. He was. It's so interesting. Danny Hodge grew up the same way, and he used his all the pain he suffered as a child. He put into willpower to become great at something, and it was wrestling, and he was. But he never, ever got over all the trauma that he suffered as a child. He was still, is still a lot of psychologists and child psychologists, there's different opinions that say that you're fully developed by 6 months. Some people say a year, some people even say 5 years before your values are firmly established. The ones that are going to mainly rule your life for the rest of your life are going to be what your values and are your basic MO, modus operandi. So what happened to those guys in the first 5 years of their life? Well, I have a close relative who had the same problem, that being separated from his mother for the first 2 weeks of his life caused him to he didn't get what's called the maternal security that you get from being at your mother's breast, the first week, immediately after you're born. I mean, normally you would lay the baby on the mother's chest so the baby could hear the heartbeat of the mother from the outside rather than from the inside, but it knew where it was. It could have a sense of security. And my relative didn't get that, and has been insecure his whole life, in spite of having accomplished some pretty remarkable things. I never had to get into a fight. I would, in bars, if I was at the bar, I made sure there was a mirror, where I could see around me and see behind me. I could see, and if I saw 3 or 4 guys, usually I wasn't alone. I had somebody, and a few times I was with my girlfriend, the one I ended up marrying. I had a couple girlfriends during my life, but not like a month at a time. One was 6 years, and the other one was for 43 years. He became my wife. But, we could see if trouble was developing, she could see it. She'd say, yeah, we need to leave. And we did. I would just go ahead and leave rather than, why stay there and get in a fight? It wasn't, I didn't run out of there like, my hair was on fire or anything. But we just, get up and casually leave. And, nobody followed us outside to the parking lot or anything or wherever we were going. We always found a place where nobody would bother us. A place where we could, a club that, for example, I was talking about a place in Miami that was mainly frequented by people who were gay. And my wife and I could go in there and dance, and nobody in there bothered us. They didn't care about us. They could care less. Could have been Andre the Giant. They wouldn't have cared. They were into their own thing, and and also knew what it was like. They knew what it was like to be looked at and stared at and being made to feel weird and all that. So yeah, we always could find a place where it was safe. And that's another thing to answer the question. I wasn't in a lot of bars because as a heel, you'd be out of your mind. A strange town. If I was, it would be with someone like Scott Irwin, and maybe somebody else, where I had there were plenty of support. And again, right. I was never ever looking for trouble. I was trying to avoid it. A fight does nobody any good, and it usually ends up you need lawyers, and you have to go to court. It's just the stupidest thing in the world. And I'm not brilliant, but I'm not stupid either. Being in court once was enough for me, quite frankly. I didn't need to have a lot of return visits to learn my lesson. So, no, I'm glad to say that I didn't get into it. In fact, there weren't a lot of bar fights. One that I do know, and I can correct a couple things at the same time. Last week, I called, I talked about a guy with the toilet paper, and I can't remember who I said it was. It was Buck Harris. I said somebody else who was not. It was the complete opposite. I think it was George
Grant.
That's who I said it was. Yeah, I said it was George Grant. Well, he's gone now, so he didn't hear it, but thank God. But yeah, it was Buck Harris. I wanted to correct that. And I still didn't like it, but it wasn't George Grant. Walk down to the ring trailing toilet paper. That's kind of a bad thing to say about somebody, even a pro wrestler. So anyway, my apology to any Mr. Grant's relatives, friends, or anybody who knew him, that I besmirched his name accidentally. And with Buck, that was just part of his act. He was older and in terrible shape physically, and so part of his act was comedy. That's the way he could get booked, and make a living. And so I even now I don't have any problem with it. I don't like it. I'm not sure what I would have done if I'd have been more experienced. But anyway, George Grant got in a fight in Australia, and that's why I brought it back. He got in a fight, and he got. I'm not saying he got beat up, but he had a kind of a black eye that looked like it might have been split open a little bit. I think he had one of those Band-Aid type stitches, on it. And his face was swollen. And of course, he came down to breakfast at stayed at the same place, the Texas Tavern in Sydney. And he came down to breakfast, and he kind of came in. He kind of covered his face a little bit, but you had to. Well, of course, it turned out there were 6 guys, and he beat 5 of them, but one of them got in a lucky punch. But what happened was, I might have told this story, but the bartender at the bar that he was at was my roommate. I was not staying at the Texas Tavern because I just gotten tired of it, and this barkeep and I had become friends. He worked at the Texas Tavern doing something else, and we had become friends. And he was a nice guy, and so he had an apartment, and I was staying with him. Well, he told me what really happened was George Grant was in a bar, and he kept going up to the bar to get drinks for him and his date. I think he was alone with a woman. And he didn't have any other wrestlers with him, is what I mean. He was with a woman, but he was alone. No, that doesn't come out exactly right, does it? He didn't have any backup, let's put it that way. And when he was going to the bar, he was kind of pushing his way around. He kind of shoved his way in, and he wasn't being polite, and he wasn't being protocol. He was saying, "Well, I'm a big star wrestler," and he was, compared to the guy who smacked him, only weighed about 170 pounds. But after 3 or 4 times of him doing it, without ever saying "excuse me" or anything, about the 3rd or 4th time he did it, he elbowed his way in. The guy I guess he elbowed the same guy aside 2 or 3 times. Well, the last time he did it, the guy smacked him. And apparently smacked him more than once, because George has several marks on him. And I asked him, well, what happened to the other guy? And I asked my roommate, I said, well, did he slaughter the other guy? He said, no. He said he backed up and went over and went back to his table. That's one I heard about. I also heard about a couple other wrestlers getting in a fight in bars. I can't think of their names. One of them was a big Hispanic guy that worked out in Amarillo. Can't think of his name. Bull Ramos.
Yeah.
He got into a scrap in a bar, and apparently he gave as good as he got, but he was marked. He got hit. So apparently the other guy.
I don't know what goes through some people's minds when they see the size of somebody, wrestler or not, just going in there and just trying to start fights for absolutely no other reason other than they're the biggest guy in the bar. And, I've been on the bad end of that a few times in my life, Bob. Not bar fights necessarily, but people wanting to just start shit with me because of my size. And not that I'm Bull Ramos or anything like that, but because of the way I'm built, my frame, like a football player, like a wrestler, my broad shoulders, broad chest, things of that nature, we can't go anywhere. We can't go to a sporting event unless somebody's trying to start something. It's like it's a running joke in my world. My wife goes, "We're just sitting here. What the fuck?" My brother, he'll come up and visit. We go to do something. He's like, "How? How does this happen every time?" We're just minding our own business. I'm like, it's just something in certain people.
Well, what's in most of these people? Booze.
Well, that's
in most of these people. Booze will make people crazy. I mean, they'll make them brave. And I had a teammate in high school. He was a 95 pounder. 95 pounds. That's 5 pounds less than 100 pounds. That was the lightest weight in high school, 95 pounds. He was a natural 95 pounder. He didn't have to cut weight. He didn't have to lose weight to get to 95. I think he really only weighed about 92 pounds. He's about 5'4". Well, wrestlers pick odd friends. He and I hit it off, and what our common denominator was we both like to drink beer. So on the weekend, we'd get together, and I never had a car till I was an adult, but, I don't know if I've reached adulthood yet, but anyway, one of us would have a car and we'd go out, and we had a guy, I still remember his name, in Lansing named Sidney, who would buy beer for us. And we'd all buy a few, they were called GIQs, Giant Imperial Quarts. Okay. I can't remember who made them, but they were bigger than your regular quart, and we'd each buy 2 or 3 of those. And we drank beer and ride around town, not looking for trouble, but, all of us were completely hopeless with the opposite sex as far as how to have a relationship, especially as we started doing this as freshmen in high school. What are we, 14, 15, 16? Very few of us had any kind of skills as far as being able to ask a girl out. A stranger, like going to a dance down at the Civic Center, for example, where you don't know anybody. Idea of walking across the dance floor and asking some girl to dance, for me, it was like walking across a bed of coals or something, because I just had no skill at it. But the little guy, the 95 pounder, he's gone now. He was sensitive about his size. And after a few beers, he all of a sudden started thinking he was a heavyweight. And the guys he would pick fights with were always monsters. One of them was a football player for Michigan State that weighed about 300 pounds. They were both waiting at McDonald's, one in one line, or, at one side of the counter and the one at the other. And I guess the big guy happened to look over at him, and my little wrestling buddy said, "What are you looking at?" or something like that. And the big guy was probably amused, but my little friend probably called him several names. Where they end up outside, I'm out there waiting in the car, and I see him going outside with this guy 3 times his size or more. And I go in there to break it up, and I usually ended up having, if there was any violence, I was usually the one that had to do the fighting. I mean, one of them was a guy who was a sergeant with like 5 stripes on his arm in the Marines. I was a junior in high school, and I'm fighting this guy out on the football field. Again, the major ingredient was beer or booze.
Sure.
And so finally we cured our little buddy by not rescuing him one time, let him take a thrashing. After that, his mouth suddenly got a lot quieter when he realized we weren't going to come rescue him anymore. I've avoided fighting for real my whole life because, there's nothing, you defend yourself. Of course, you have to defend your loved ones. Of course, defend. Well, I enlisted in the service. I was willing to defend my country. I mean, we almost went to war with Russia over the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Right.
While I was I came close. We were at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Special Forces training. We were all told to suit up, get all our stuff ready. We were all ready to be transported down to Florida to get ready to fight. War started with Russia, and eventually the Russian ship, they had discovered that there were Russian rockets on Cuba. And President Kennedy, John F. Kennedy was the president at the time. He had issued an ultimatum to Khrushchev, the Russian premier, to get the rockets out of Cuba. And so a ship was coming, and from Russia was coming to Cuba. They didn't know if it was coming to take the rockets out or to bring more rockets. So, and there was no communication going on. So the United States would start preparing for war. We're talking about nuclear war here, too. And with Russian rockets, nuclear, with atom bombs on the tips, 50, 60 miles offshore from Florida, that's not real comfortable feeling, because you don't have time to retaliate. They could hit New York in a matter of minutes. If they shoot if the rockets, I don't know how we got this far off, but if the rockets come from Russia, you have plenty of time to defend yourself. Well, anyway, no, I didn't get.
I've never been in a bar fight while we talk about the Cuban Missile Crisis. That might be a new level for you, Bob. I don't know. We didn't just get that far away off topic. We
I'm
talking
sorry.
about the other side of the earth here with Russia and all kinds of good stuff.
I'm so sorry. No, I never got into a bar fight.
Well, people can tell you were a teacher. See, I mean, it may not have been your subject of choice, but it's fun to educate while we discuss wrestling at the same time. So people can walk away and say, "What did Bob talk about this? He talked about the Cuban Missile Crisis. Get the fuck out of here." So it's
well, I do think about it in between our on-air sessions.
Yeah,
about how much of myself, I mean, who is behind the wrestler? The wrestler was an actor. Now, a lot of people don't want to hear that. I mean, especially wrestlers. But we were going out there and pretending to hurt each other. I mean, you can't hit a guy with like a metal chair 4 or 5 times and not bust him open. And that happened many, many times. Whack, whack, whack with a steel chair. There's not even a bump on the guy's head. So, I mean, yes, we were, I sometimes when people say, well, if it comes up, I said, well, I was an actor for 15 years. I can certainly act out this little role you're asking me to play here. Now, again, if that offends anybody, I'm sorry. But Vince McMahon Jr. beat me to it by saying that we were all just, what did he call it?
Sports entertainers.
Yes, we were entertainers. How can you be a real serious wrestler if you're a sports entertainer? It's not really entertaining to get the crap beat out of you, at least not for me. But, people who like violence, they got it. That's why people go to see movies, horror movies, people who like to be scared, romantic movies, comedies if they like to be amused, romance if they're romantic. They go to see movies and they get involved. They suspend their disbelief and they get involved in it. I remember watching 1984 and coming out of the theater, and it was late in the evening, and there was no traffic on the street, and that was kind of the theme of the movie, that like civilization had been wiped out. And I had just the eeriest feeling. For some reason, it was a busy street in East Lansing, Michigan, and there was no traffic. It was about 11 o'clock at night. There's no traffic. I thought, oh my God, this is too much like the movie. But anyway, fairly quickly, a car or two came along, and I realized I wasn't in a theater anymore. But
back to reality.
Yeah, back to reality, which is harsh enough. But no, I'm glad that I didn't get in fights in bars, and I tell you why. We have absolutely nothing to gain by doing it. You're a bully if you win, and also you're being sued. And maybe charges are being pressed and you're being arrested. So there's just no way, there's no win. If you're defending the business, there's a way to do it other than beating the crap out of the other guy. Some people say, that punch was real. Yeah, but the punch is going to cost you $5,000. I mean, is it worth it really? Let them come to the, I did tell a few people, you know what? You're welcome to come to the matches. I take on all comers. Come on down to the arena next week and bring some tights. I'll get in the ring with you, and we'll see. We'll see if you can beat me up. You can beat me up, but I'm not going to fight you here. And I only had to do that one time. And the other thing is, if you're standing at a bar and the fight starts, if you don't jump over the bar and look at all the weapons that are all laying right there, there's usually a club, a couple of knives. They're not meant to stab anybody. They're meant for cutting up lemons or limes or whatever. There's corkscrews for opening bottles of wine. There's all kinds of weapons right there, plus all those bottles on the shelf behind you. All those are real easy to grab and throw at whoever. If there's like 2 or 3 people coming after you, you have all kinds of weapons. That's why I always stood in a bar. I very seldom went into clubs and went back into a corner somewhere where I'd be trapped if 4 or 5 guys decided to come after me. Never. I mean, you'd be an idiot to do that. If you had heat, and especially after the deal with Steve Kern's dad, I had some pretty serious heat in Florida. I mean, it lasted for years. I still get people remind me of it. No, bar fights, no. And they actually teach philosophy in college, teach people how to think. Then you realize that fighting...
Well, some people need that, Bob.
Yeah, well, if they're willing to try to learn how to think, that's good. At least they're trying, Some people just want to go along the merry path and let everybody tell them what to do and not think for themselves. And if that's how you're comfortable, well, good for you. That's fine. That's not how I prefer to do it. Most people are telling me to do things I don't want to do. All my life, people have been saying, Bob, you spend a lot of time where I don't know exactly what you're doing, but you're not actually working. How about, why don't you go get a job? Well, I don't want to hear that kind of advice, quite frankly. If I wanted a job, I'd have one. So obviously I don't want one at the moment. When I'm ready to go back to work, I'll go back to work. And, here we are all these years later. I'm still alive. I'm in reasonable good health. I wrote a post this morning on Facebook, and I was talking about our business. WrestleCopia.com and the Wrestling Stoop and Ray Russell. You're my co-host and mentor. So you are my mentor. You better keep me on the straight and narrow. I know you try real hard to keep me there, but it'd be like trying to arm wrestle with an octopus. You beat one arm and there's seven more come up.
That's a good analogy sometimes, anyway. It depends on the week, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's all good.
Sounds kind of fishy to me. I'm sorry. I can't help it. I need to slap myself up where everybody can hear it for some of the crap I come up with. My wife, if it makes anybody feel better, my wife used to tell me, dear, you are witty about half the time. And what she was actually saying in a very loving way is that I'm a half-wit.
I see.
Yeah. And, when I think about it, and now that you've listened to the last half hour or so, you made me think that's too much praise. Maybe it's no wit, but anyway, we're here together, so let's move forward.
Yeah, we're going to move forward. We got Mark D asking a question going back to, I guess, specifically Georgia wrestling and your time there. He asks, he says, for every Tim Horner, there was a Joe Blow as enhancement talent. He wants to know, how did Ole Anderson, or whomever was in charge of finding the enhancement, how did they come about selecting the guys who worked as the job guys in the studio wrestling? And I get what he's talking about there because, I've covered a lot of that in my regional wrestling podcast with Jamie Ward. We go back and we watch all of the footage. And there's a lot of talent that recognizable. They would come back week after week. The Mike Jacksons, the names like that. But then randomly, every once in a while, there would be a guy who did not look like a wrestler, very pale, and his clothes didn't really fit him. His trunks kind of falling off, and you kind of question if those are wrestling boots. And they have no idea how to hit the ropes or take a proper bump. And you wonder, how did this guy get on TV? So, Bob, do you have any memories, any stories? We can go beyond Ole in Georgia. Do you know how guys went about picking these guys who were clearly not trained or ready for televised wrestling? Do you know how they went about that?
Oh, they went about it very unprofessionally because I never did that. I was a booker in 3 different territories, and I'm not bragging. There were guys that booked for 20, 25 years, George Scott and people like that. I had a very limited, but I was in 3 different places, and I had, in Florida, I had good minds, to be around with Eddie Graham when he was sober, and some of the people, Harley. I got to work with Harley for almost a year as a co-booker with him. So I was around good minds. We would never put someone like that in the ring who was an obvious embarrassment. One I do remember was the most unfortunate, and I've talked about this one before too. I'm not slandering anybody here. Buddy Fuller came up with the idea of trying to make Jack Briscoe, who was a top babyface, of making him look mean, be a mean babyface. So he had the idea of doing some of that. We talked about some of the stuff over there in the other southern states with Don Fargo with the Hardways and all that. What Buddy wanted to do was have Jack Briscoe hardway some poor guy in the ring, and to show that he had an angle going. And he had something horrible I don't remember exactly what it was, but something horrible had been done. And the heel was formidable. So Buddy came up with the idea. I think he might have been booking or co-booker or whatever. I know a couple of times when I called, he was the one that answered the phone. So I assumed he was booking. And he came up with the idea of having Jack Hardway, this guy. I'd never seen the guy before, but he's the only one of what you just mentioned who had on tights that looked like he borrowed. They were too big for him. Boots that didn't look like they fit. And he didn't carry himself like a wrestler. He looked like he didn't have a clue what he was doing. And he didn't. All Jack did was basically took him down. He started punching him. Well, Jack didn't know how to hard way. And he thought that smacking, hitting the guy on the eyebrow, just a straight hit to the eyebrow was going to do it. And it won't. It might, but it won't always. Jack hit the guy, I don't know, at least 10 times, if not more. And the guy didn't sign up for this. He got told that, hey, maybe they might, hit you in a way where you might bleed a little bit, but they won't need stitches or anything, so don't worry about it. I'm sure they told him something. Maybe they didn't tell him anything. I don't know. That would be criminal, actually. But anyway, what they did was criminal. They just ruined Jack and his mentality. He was morose for about 2 weeks after that, just down in the dumps because he looked like a bully, a guy that was his size or smaller and nowhere near as fit. And here he is, a champion, and he's been a Florida champion, all kinds of championships. He hadn't been world champion yet, but I think he was. Maybe they were getting him. You know what it was? They might have been getting him ready for Terry Funk. That might be what it was. And Terry could hard way guys, and Terry could come out there and be, he could put on the mean guy act and be very convincing. So maybe that's what it was for. But Jack hit this guy so many times that the only way his eye did break open, his eyebrow. But the reason why was because it had swollen up to about the size of a golf ball. And when he hit that swelling, it's sickening to even say it. It split open. And Jack was just sick about it afterwards. He was so pissed off. He came back and grabbed his clothes and just left. He was so pissed off at being asked to do that. And he was a shareholder in the company. He had stock in the company. He and Jack and Jerry both did. So, he felt responsible to, help the company out by doing what he was asked to do. But personally, it just, we talked about it. I think I might have been a heel by that time, so we weren't riding together anymore. But we had a chance to talk about it, and he told me it made, just made him sick. And, but it's stuff like that when we talked about in the past that cost Eddie Graham, who made Jack Briscoe. He certainly enhanced the career of Jerry Briscoe. He made Dusty Rhodes. He made me. He started Dick Slater.
There's a long list, absolutely.
Brian Blair.
Yeah.
Whole bunch of guys, but he made some superstars. Now, I'm not including myself, but Dusty Rhodes, Jack Briscoe, the Funks were enhanced by what they did there because Amarillo was a small territory. Right. And this is before cable TV.
Yeah.
So this is a big deal. But the Florida show was being seen on some channels up in New York even before cable TV. Mm-hmm. You could go from working in Florida, you could go work in Madison Square Garden, and they would know who you were from having, not everybody, but the people who got the Florida TV channel would know who you were. Anyway, but no, Jack was absolutely just sick about it. And but that's the only time I've seen a guy. Now, there were times with Ole where we had a ring, and a guy would profess to be able to do something, and we'd go out in the ring, and Ole would have him do a couple things, and then just about every case, one guy tripped, great big guy, he looked great, but he tripped getting in the ring. Ole didn't even give him a chance to do anything else. He said, you piece of, what,
Sure.
you piece of, you piece of Andre droppings, get out of here. You can't even get in the ring. You want to be a wrestler? Get out.
I'm sure that was a very clean version of what Ole actually said in that specific incident. But I get it. But it is funny because when you go back and watch it, it doesn't happen often. And as time progresses, it gets less and less. But there are weeks where maybe not enough job guys showed up. I don't know what the deal is. And so maybe guys just stand around. I can wrestle. And are you sure? Well, I got a pair of trunks. All right, we'll give it a try. I mean, there are a few. I mean, it's on one hand I can count right now, just covering 81 and the first part of 82. But there have been at least a small handful of guys that had no business ever getting in a ring that made it to TV. And you could tell. There was one specifically, I remember they were in there with Bill Eadie when he was doing the superstar gimmick. And he tries to work with the guy, God bless Eadie. And he sees that he can't work with the guy. And so a match that was probably supposed to go 5 or 6 minutes, extended squash, it goes about a minute. Edie realizes, well, we're not doing anything here. I'm going straight into my Cobra clutch, and we're taking this home. You can kind of read that stuff if you know what you're looking for.
Oh yeah,
and I've seen it. Yeah, because you don't want to hurt yourself. You can hurt yourself. The guy don't have to do anything. If he falls on you wrong, you can hurt yourself, and you can't take that risk. But you also don't want to look like a fool. If this guy doesn't know how to hit the ropes or bump properly, I can't really work with him. I'm going to look stupid when I hit my moves. So it's the best thing to do is to take it home. So I've seen that a few times where guys just had no business in there. Memphis was notorious for that. Like, you could pretty much turn on Memphis TV almost any week, and who's that guy? And you go, and you would never see him again for good reason as well. But if, we joke all the time on the other podcasts when we cover Memphis, like, sometimes it just feels like Jerry Jarrett just open door policy, literally open. Anybody out there in the street want to come in and try their hand at, wrestling out here or something like that. But I'm not knocking the stars of Memphis, but just sometimes the job guys would be very questionable. We'll put it that way. But you would see that in Georgia as well. And sometimes I even wonder, some of these guys specifically, like let's say Buzz Sawyer's in there with one of the job guys, and I'm calling these guys job guys because you never hear tell of them again. But I often wonder, was this, we hear tell of Buzz and his ways, how he would con some of these wannabe wrestlers into paying him to, quote unquote, train them. And I'm wondering if some of these guys were just, this was a favor. They were throwing a bone, get in there, I got you on TV, boy, and I'll give me my, my $6,000 or whatever nonsense that they would do to these guys and things.
You're very close exactly to what I was thinking, that these might be refugees from a training school that was promised, they guaranteed when maybe there was a contract that they signed, but they guaranteed that they would get them a match. They would get them a match, and maybe not on TV, but they're going to get them a match.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the TV match would be it, and like what Bill was a heel, right?
Yes.
Well, you're talking about him losing all his heat if he goes 5 minutes with this guy. He would. I'm not saying he'd lose all of it, but he certainly lose a lot of his credibility.
It wouldn't be a pretty match, no.
Well, I mean, how can you possibly go by it? The only way you could do it is if you kept pulling the guy. Well, no, if you pin the guy, you keep pulling him up. Instead of the 1-2, you get the 1-2, you pull him up by the hair and punish him some more. But you can't do that too long either. Well, you could as a heel, but then you get to the point of, wait a minute, this is like too much. This has become too weird. It's it's obvious there's something going on here that it's not it's not makes no sense even for nonsensical business like wrestling. What's going on in there? But you had situations where promoters' children were featured and who absolutely had no business at all being in the ring. Now,
Sorry.
Mike Graham's not one of them, but Mike had no business being in there against Andre the Giant or Big Bad John or someone. He was huge. Although you could do it. I mean, it was a work.
I think Mike had enough fire that he would, I mean, if Florida would, I think the Florida fans would buy it. But I get where you're going with that because of Mike's size and things like that. But no, there were certainly some, second generation stars to the promoting fathers that had enough talent that deserved, that spot. I don't know that they would have got that spot because they couldn't find it anywhere else, although they didn't really need to either, some of them. Now, the Funks, obviously, they were just amazing, so they could do that pretty much anywhere on a national level. But other guys, never really made it out of certain regions and things that were pretty talented. And then, of course, there were the George Goulises of the world as well. So it was a little bit of a hodgepodge of everything. But so that question, though, let me piggyback on the question myself. So we talked about these random job guys that would just kind of get found, whether they were the janitor, mopping up, or they were, like you said, maybe they got trained by somebody local that only owed a small favor to in Augusta or something like that. All right, let them come in this week or whatever and do the job. But so I got to ask you, do you recall ever getting in the ring with someone who was, quote unquote, the drizzling shit, so to speak, as regards to like, what the fuck is this? Who is this guy? And you realized this guy's clearly not trained.
No, I did get into the ring with people who, and it was before I learned to work. Once I learned to work, I could have figured out a way. But the booker, I think it was Johnny Weaver at the time, asked me to go 5 or 6 minutes with these guys who were not only old and bald, pudgy, 5'6", 200 pounds, had been there as enhancement talent for 10 years, had been beat to death, and I'm asked to go on this rescue Olympian. I outweigh the guy by 100 pounds, and I'm supposed to go out there and go 6 minutes with him. Sorry, I was so green that I remember the match, the first one. The guy was I'm sure he was a nice enough guy. I don't know. I never got to know him. But he hung around the office. He was, and I don't want to say stooge, but he was a helpful. He hung around the office, and old man Crockett used him to as a runner. So Aaron, kind of an errand boy, whatever. Well, he hit me with a little short punch to the stomach, like from 4 inches away, and then turned and walked away from me. Like I'm supposed to fall over and start puking or something from his punch. And I didn't react at all. But the audience, the reaction I got from the audience was like almost total silence. It's like, what the hell was that? And I ran after this guy and pulled him around and whipped him up and gave him the shoulder breaker. And I bounced him. I didn't try to hurt him, but I could lift a guy. I had one arm. My left arm would be under his left shoulder. So I would bounce his right shoulder off my knee, but I could lift him with both hands. And I bounced him about 1.5 feet off my knee, and I was lifting him. I didn't hurt him, but I mean, it looked like I killed him when giving him the shoulder breaker, and then pinned him. And I got up and I didn't run out of the ring. I jumped up. I didn't raise my hands in triumph or anything. I just got up and left the ring. I was pissed off and embarrassed. And I was a rookie. I only my third territory. And I was thinking, I'm supposed to go 6, 7 minutes with this guy. I went 15 seconds. Well, let's see what happens. Well, we were either, the booker said to go, the referee told me once to go 7, 8 minutes. I waited to see if there are going to be any repercussions. But nobody said anything to me. No, Weaver didn't say a word. I didn't go check with him. I didn't go ask him, hey, the hell was that? I just went and, started taking I was through for the day. For the moment, I went and started taking my boots off and all that. Nobody said anything to me. But after doing that, I did that they put me with, we got 3 or 4 guys like that. And every time I was supposed to go, one time I was supposed to go 10 minutes. I did an average of 30 seconds at the most with these guys. And after I never got reprimanded or fined or told anything. I don't know. Maybe they were afraid of me. I don't know. I remember how I felt about Dr. Death 10 years after I had been in the business where I was no longer in any kind of shape. And I really wouldn't want to piss him off either. So maybe that's what they were thinking, we don't want to piss this shooter off. But
well, to be fair, you were at a higher level still being pushed by Bill Watts than these guys were on the TV. So they had probably already been there and done that. They were just kind of collecting whatever kind of a paycheck they were still getting. I think, at that point in your career, you're riding high, you're just getting going. And these guys are like, just don't hurt me. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, I had no problem with them. Wasn't their fault. I had no problem with them at all. They didn't book themselves with me. But after about, after about the 3rd or 4th time I did it, Thunderbolt Patterson and I were buddies. We'd been in Australia together and roomed together. And if you can room with Thunderbolt, and Bolt, if you're out there and hearing this, I'm telling the truth. Thunderbolt snores like you imagine Andre might snore when he's really, really drunk and and just really, really, really loose. And in order to share a room on the road, we all had our own rooms at the Texas Tavern. But when we went to New Zealand and Melbourne and other places, Barnett would get doubles. He wouldn't get everybody wouldn't get their own room. So on the road, I would share a room with Thunderbolt because we got along, and I think we probably were both smoking pot together or something. But I just met him over there. We were getting along, and so later in Charlotte or in Raleigh or wherever it was, I came after about the 4th time after I did that 20-second thing. As I came out, Thunderbolt and Jerry Briscoe both were waiting for me as I came back to enter in the dressing room, still a baby face. And they both said, you're getting over. You're getting over with this stuff. And that was all I knew what getting over was.
Right.
But that's what they were saying. By doing it this way, you're getting over. If I'd have gone 5 minutes with the guy, that's what I mean when I say Bill Eadie couldn't go 5 minutes with this guy and keep his heat. Unless he, unless he maybe figured out some way to tie him in the ropes and start lighting cigarettes and torturing the guy or something. I don't know how you would, how you go that long with it. So now some skilled workers out there say, yeah, there's ways, Bob. You walk and talk and, you argue with the referee before you make fun of the guy, you laugh and, you say, you point out, look at you talk to the audience and, if you're a heel, you're talking to the audience saying, you look at this punk. You believe they put this punk out here and you kill your 5 minutes that way before you ever even touch the guy.
Right.
And then you beat him in 10 seconds. But that's after you learn how to work. And the moment
early
in time,
in Bob Roop's career for that, huh?
Yeah, it was way too early. Yeah, I didn't know how to walk. I barely knew how to talk, much less walk and talk. So I didn't know, when I say talk, I didn't know how to interview. I didn't know how to yell at the crowd. There was a guy, you might remember his name. His son was one of the Englishmen who worked for Global. But his dad was famous for being one of the first English wrestlers to engage crowds, to actually talk to the audience.
Man, I'm trying to think who was working in Global. I'll have to go back to the Global videos.
It was a young blonde man. His father got over in Australia, in England, but he was one of the first guys that used to yell at he would engage the audience. Nobody else did it. He did. He would talk to people. He would yell at people in the audience and get a response, and it got over. And because it did, the promoter said, "Well, don't all of you start doing that. It's working for this guy." I'll remember his name, just like Buck Harris. I'll remember it next week. But yeah, the point was, again, of going out there against somebody who looked totally inept. Now, shooting, wrestling for real, I went out against some guys that were incredibly, the idea that I don't know what they thought what they had been told was going to happen, but they were in shape. They didn't look like they were in good enough shape to tie their shoes without blowing up, and would come out there. They were going to wrestle, work out with me, and I, some of these guys I had in the sugar hole within 5 seconds because I didn't want to even take a chance of getting hurt. All I got to do is just inadvertently. I remember the one time Ronnie Garvin brought up this guy who had been nagging him for weeks in Fort Myers about wrestling, and was a middle-aged guy. He showed, and Ronnie Condon had been coming up to the Snake Pit in Tampa, and for a tryout. The guy was in his mid-40s, balding. He showed up in a suit, and Ronnie, and Eddie Graham, we talked about, sadism and how they like seeing people getting hurt and all that. So I'm working with this guy. I haven't done anything to him yet, but I've got his arms tied up, and I'm looking over. Eddie Graham's saying something. I look over, and I've got the guys tied up. He can't bite me or anything, but I happen to look the wrong way, and the guy brought up a knee and kneed me right in the mouth, and my lower teeth went through my lower lip, and that, while I didn't need stitches, what that happens is that like creates a cold sore that won't go away for like 2 weeks till it heals. Oh, was I pissed off? That was the guy I was wrestling barefoot because I didn't know I was going to be shooting with anybody. All I had on was a pair of tights. That was the guy I chased out, past a bunch of people waiting in line to buy tickets.
Right. I remember that story. Yeah.
Ran him across the street, and I had to stop because the vacant lot that he ran across was full of the kind of spurs you step on, they stick in your feet. Yeah. I was barefoot, so I ran about 5 feet under that, and I had to stop, turn back. But, and I was calling him every name in the book, too. And I was supposed to be a babyface. I had to walk back past a line of about 50 people, and about half of them had still had their jaw hanging down from what they had just seen. Because
life before camera phones. Only if we could have seen that on YouTube today. Bob Roop chasing wannabe wrestler across the street. It's good stuff, man.
Yeah, the guy weighs about 160 pounds. Well, I dashed by him, and once I realized I couldn't chase him, I didn't take a dignified walk back. I raced back inside like I had a phone call from the president waiting for me because I was so embarrassed to be out there. But by the time half the people still had their jaw hanging down when I went by on the return trip, like, what the hell did I just see here? The so-called good guy, Bob Roop, this Olympian, calling this guy every name in the book, words we've never even heard before. Right. But obviously are obscene, and chasing this old man.
Well, they'll think twice about trying to, become a wrestler themselves, perhaps. I don't know. This
guy was screaming. This guy was screaming for help at the time, too.
Well, nobody helped him, though. Think about that.
Which didn't help me. That's for damn sure.
No, that's true. That's true, too. Yeah,
I look like the biggest bully in the world. But that's funny now I think about it.
Well, that's... I wonder if that guy's still out there. I wonder if he's listening. I'm always talking about me, but no, that's another fun story, guys. Another fun trip through time here on the Wrestling Stoop. We'll be back soon. Going to have another episode coming your way. I do encourage everybody to continue to send in those questions. Bob will take your questions. We'll answer them in time here on the program. Next episode, going to try something a little different. Hopefully, Bob, you might have a few answers to this. I am just ready to hit send here on an email I'm going to be sending you of 30 names, or roughly 30 names, from the first 2 years in the business that you encountered there, mostly in the Florida territory. And you seem to have really vivid memories of your earliest time because you were breaking in and observing everything and like you were trying to learn everything. And so you have some really fond stories of a lot of the early guys you came in contact with. So even if a handful of these names ring a bell and you're able to share a couple stories, that'll be fun to go back in time and talk about some of the earliest days of your time in the business, and maybe some fun stories from some of these guys that I'm going to be sending you here in an email. So that's going to be some of what we do next time around, and we'll also be continuing to answer the questions. And you got the Glory Days GrappleCon 3 coming up very soon here. We'll talk about that on the next episode as well. I do want to encourage everybody to stop over to bobroop.com. You can also find Bob over on Facebook at Poor Bob Roop, and he's always got some great anecdotes over there. It's always fun to read whatever Bob comes up with day to day. But unfortunately, time has fallen short here for us. I do have another appointment scheduled here, so we got to wrap things up for this week. But Bob, I want to thank you again for coming out here for another, almost hour 40, I think we did this week. So it's always a good time here on the program.
Well, thank you. And I want to tell you folks out there, keep sending in your letters. I will get them answered eventually. Another factor that should come, because I think about it, I get off track a lot, and poor Ray, I go, but the problem is, I wrestled as Bob Roop. I wrestled under my own name. So I did play the Mayhaw Singh character for a while, but only for a few months. So the person that's talking to you, I'm telling you about my personal life, about things, because that was the person that you saw as a wrestler, or it was the things that made me the wrestler. The way I behaved as a wrestler was based on how I was brought up a lot. So that some of the personal information that you get, you're not going to get from other wrestlers, because maybe what they did before. I know one guy, his job before he got into wrestling was pumping gasoline. Well, he's not going to want to talk about his history. There's nothing, but I've got some things in my background that I feel like if you know me better, and maybe I'm wrong, Ray, you can smart me up when we're off the air. Please try not to cuss at me, but I feel like if you get to know me better, it makes the stories more personal of what happened, of what I'm doing to other people, and that's my purpose. So bear with us, please. I know it's not for everybody out there, but I hope that you'll stick with us, and the wrestling stories, they'll arrive sooner or later. So please stick with us and stay well. I can't order you to, but I'm sending my most heartfelt wishes for you and yours to stay well. I hope you find peace and contentment.